Right, I'd love to hear some comments from our participants today. We're quite a small group, so it would be really great if you feel able to chat. Sorry about the low lighting. It's gone really dark outside, and this is the best I can do. I look better in the low light, maybe. So, Katia, you mentioned that you love the finger technique. So, I'd love to find out: is that something that you already use, or is that something that you've just seen me use and think, oh, actually, yeah, I can take that into my classroom? You feeling brave, Katia? Hi.
Hello,
Hi.
hello, hi. It's morning here still.
Is it a sunny
Hello.
morning as well? Is it a beautiful sunny morning? Oh gosh, jealous, jealous, jealous.
Yes, I really like that technique because I was thinking of changing something about my error correction techniques, and and I because I teach adult students and they are very visual, so I think that using fingers could help them like understand what you want to say without explaining too much.
Yeah,
Because sometimes when you explain too much, it's like worse. Like I think for me they get more confused. The
absolutely.
more like the more I try to understand using my, I don't know, my own words in English, for example, they could get lost.
Yeah.
So maybe fingers using in the way that you were explaining, I think could be, because I like the way that you say, okay, you were like the is very I like it because it's just because you use your face, but also this like kind of not only with the face, but also with your voice, giving your voice like a kind of, okay, this is not, but without saying it's an
No,
error.
you're
I don't
wrong.
know.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I'm
You're
really
wrong.
glad. Yeah, I'm really glad that you like that and you picked that up because yeah, I think you know, like telling students no, you're wrong, you know, I think
Mm-hmm.
it can be done, but it can be super demotivating. And there's a couple of comments that we'll come to about that in the chat box. But yeah, I'm glad that you're on board with the finger technique, Katia, because I think you hit on the key thing there that trying to correct errors with language when they're
Yes.
just learning the language is not always going to be your friend. You know, like more words can confuse them. And with immediate error correction, for me, the focus is on, can I fix it quickly? You know, if
Yes.
it's a problem that needs to be taught, then I might note that down and store it away and do like maybe a mini teach at the end of the lesson if it's appropriate. But I think, you know, when you're trying to go with the flow of a conversation, or when you're kind of like, you know, in a particular part of the class and you need to move on to like, you know, the next part of the class, I really think that like the finger technique can be a quick and relatively simple way of helping the students see
Yes.
and then
Yes.
hopefully fix their own mistake.
Yes. I like and more motivating because some techniques could be like, unfriendly for
Yeah.
them, so they could get stuck in the language, and that's what we don't want to them to do. So that's why I wanted to be here, because I would like to know like more friendly techniques, because error correction uh, for students, for example, for my students, uh, it's something like they like at the same time, but at the same time they get demotivated with them.
Right.
So it's the kind of balance that it's not easy to, sometimes, I don't know, it's not easy to get
Yeah, I
for
totally
us
agree.
teachers, because they need it, they want it, but at the same time it's like, keep a balance on in which moment it's better at the end of the class, yes, and it's a general way, but sometimes there are activities that you need to focus on language, um, and they need to do it the best they can, so you have to correct them at sometimes at the same moment, and this that so they can understand what is the mistake.
Exactly.
Otherwise at the end it's like, teacher, what was that word,
Exactly. That's the key thing I think about immediate error correction, that you're right, you have to walk a really fine line between like
yes,
motivation and confidence, but it is
yes.
also really
Mhm.
important sometimes that the students get the quick fix, because if they're not picked up and corrected, then
Yes,
they'll forget that mistake was made, or
yes,
it becomes irrelevant by the end of the class. They can't even remember what they said. So that, you know, as teachers, I think we have a responsibility, we have a
yes,
duty to kind of make sure that, you know, delayed error correction certainly has its place, but to be more assertive in our immediate error correction as well, for the long-term benefit of the learner.
Yes, to avoid fossilization, because that's why we don't
Exactly.
want to.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, for sure.
Because with beginners it's easier, but when we had advanced students, oh my God, you know, it's hard to break this.
It's really hard to break those habits. Exactly. So you've got to kind of like, you know, get them while they're still malleable, you know, because if things become fossilized, it's much, much harder to change them.
It's much, much harder.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katia. Stick around. I hope we can have another chat in just a second. I noticed that, Nicola, you said that you also like the finger technique and the puzzled face and the puzzled voice. So I'm wondering, do you use a combination of face and voice? Do you use a combination of fingers and face? What's your kind of modus operandi when you're dealing with immediate error correction? Would you be able to talk to us?
Yes, absolutely.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Well, I have to say I'm an absolute newbie at this. I only passed my TEFL last month.
Congratulations.
Which I'm very excited about. Thank you so much. However, I'm going to say, to give my age away now, I mean, I was learning languages in 1970 something, and then uni in 80s. Yeah, so and I remember very much the things that kind of worked for me as a then very shy student. And I remember with horror certain things that just embarrassed me so much. So I kind of, like it or not, that's kind of still in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm about to be sort of teaching live some students from South Korea. And I know a lot of them are very, very shy. So my kind of one concern with them is going to be when you're asking a question and they're so fearful of making a mistake, which I understand is the situation from a previous set. It's sort of like, how do you draw them out? What do you find is the best way to draw them out? And whilst trying to convey to them that it doesn't matter that if they make a mistake, it's important that they try, and that we all learn from our mistakes, and we can all learn from each other.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really, really valid point. And I think for me, are they going to be adults or kids?
They are 19 to 24-year-olds.
Okay, yeah, so your university student age group.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's really important to establish ground rules at the beginning. So the ground rules will be that, you know, this is your space to play with English and to make mistakes, and that mistakes are welcome and a necessary part of the learning process. So establishing that, you know, from the teacher's point of view, nothing they can say is bad. You know, it's all about communication, it's all about trying, and you will make mistakes when you try, and that's absolutely okay, and we'll fix them together. So really trying to establish the fact that it's a safe, supportive, experimental play space that they can, like, you know, have a go, get things wrong, and that's okay, because that's how they learn. And I would also kind of like temper that with praising every time somebody speaks.
Yes.
You know, I think praise is really important.
This is so good. Yeah. That's very much kind of what I feel. So that's really nice to hear that you you know, you concur, because that seems my sort of an instinctive way as well to go about it, as well as what we were taught on the TEFL course.
Yeah, focus on the meaning, you know. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, like, oh, you know, thank you for sharing that, that's a really interesting idea, or, you know, thinking about the content of the conversation before you then, I just wonder if there's a way that we could say this a little differently, or I just want to help you a bit with your pronunciation there, so next time you say it's even better. So making sure that you're really kind of like, you know, heaping the praise on, so that you're building up their confidence, and then they're not going to be afraid to kind of like, you know, have a go at saying something.
Yeah, and just that constant encouragement, and the smiling. And I know it's difficult over Zoom, but I think
you'd be surprised,
well,
actually. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's my experience that, you know, rapport can still be created even over an online environment. You know, and it can be a little trickier to encourage people to speak. You know, when you're in a physical space, you can use eye contact to encourage the quieter corners to contribute. But of course, on Zoom, you don't really have that facility. So you might have to make more use of like nominating, so using people's actual names. But I would say that when you're in the breakout rooms, you know, listen really carefully to who said what and make a note so that when you come back to do feedback to a task, which is a great opportunity for error correction, you know, again, you can start with like advanced validation, I call it. So, you know, like, you know, Jung Lee, I know you've got number 3, right? Tell everybody what you said. You know, so you're giving them that advanced validation, and you're not sort of like, you know, selecting people that you're worried are going to get it wrong, you know. So I think that's definitely a way that you can support and help them. And, you know, maybe for the first week or 2, you might want to focus just on the delayed error correction. But I think as your rapport with them grows and as they get to know you and they get to know each other, I think, you know, just trickle in, sprinkle in a little bit of immediate error correction, especially if it's pronunciation, because they're obviously going to have the same pronunciation mistakes if you're working in a monolingual environment.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
To actually address your question at the beginning, the sort of the finger technique is the one that actually I saw Adrian Underhill on a YouTube video during my course, and it just really resonated. It just seemed to make sense and work really well. And then just instinctively using your kind of the puzzled voice and the kind of puzzled facial expression, that seems to kind of work for me. Those are the ones that I favor.
Yeah, great. And those are the things that like that do work really well over Zoom, you know, that students can see. It's like, what's going on there? But yeah, I mean, that sounds like it's going to be a really great experience. So I wish you all the luck in the world with that. It should be really fun.
I'll need it. Thank you. No, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. Challenging, but it's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Just to kind of like, you know, blow my own trumpet for a second, Nicola, there is a great workshop I did on drilling. And I think with your pronunciation issues with the Koreans, there's just a couple of little techniques with drilling that you might want to have a go at, because, you know, drilling should be fun. And it should be kind of like, you know, done on a really, really regular basis, because, you know, they need the practice to get stuff right. They really do. So yeah, if you're signed up to Gallery, have a look at the drilling workshop, because we talk about different ways to support teachers who need to help the students get better with pronunciation.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Yes, I will do.
Yeah. And I noticed that, Hedy, you'd mentioned, you know, in terms of a bit of drilling, like doing back chaining to teach vegetable. Hedy, can you explain back chaining to Nicola for us if she hasn't met it before? Are you happy to do that?
I try and do my best.
I can be your student.
So,
vegetable teacher.
Yeah,
vegetable.
I had that exact student exactly, and so what I did, it was a kind of drilling, but starting it from the end of the word. So it's like able, just asking the student. Actually, I asked the whole class to repeat that, because I didn't want to single out that student. So, you know, just I didn't want her to feel embarrassed. So I asked everyone to listen and repeat after me: able, and then vegetable, and still she said vegetable. And, you know, like, it was so funny, because we were trying, let's go back to the end again, and she got it right once, then she made a mistake again, or an error again, and then I just said, oh, that's fine, don't worry, we'll go on practicing this in the coming classes, because sometimes that's the way, like, of doing, so we can't get everything right for the first time, I can guess. So actually, I love, you had a quote, Susie, once in one of your workshops, where you said that it doesn't need to be perfect, but do you remember that? It doesn't need to be perfect, but it
can be better.
Yes, exactly. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point, Hedy. Like, you know, I think, you know, let's take perfection off the table. You know, none of us is perfect, and that's absolutely okay. We're working in a global industry, you know, with international clients. You know, 9 times out of 10, English is going to be spoken between people who don't have English as a first language. So there are going to be accents, there are going to be errors, and I think that's okay. You know, but definitely, you know, we're not going to worry about perfection, but we are going to aim for better. And I think, yeah, it's picking your battles and, like, you know, knowing when to stop. You know, if they can't get it, they can't get it. But if you can come back and keep practicing, maybe they can improve it.
Yeah,
I love that idea.
I agree. And it's also with perfection, I sometimes say that it's better to aim to be better and better than to be perfect, because if I aim to be perfect, I put a lid, you know, and which I cannot cross. So, but when I keep just aiming to be better and better and better, I can
keep going. I love that. I'm stealing that. That's a great one. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And I think
that's really helpful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. I'm just kind of like looking back in the chat box, Eddie, and you mentioned about, you know, what do you do with students when they still keep making the same errors? And this is an example of fossilization. If the learners haven't been corrected, you know, right from beginners and elementary, again, it's walking that line of, like, you know, confidence, motivation, but making sure they get stuff right. Because if mistakes are left, you know, unchecked, then those mistakes are going to fossilize, and that's just going to, you know, keep adding to the problems until the student's going to become, you know, in a state where it's too late sometimes to fix those mistakes, you know, and there comes a point when it's too late. You know, often with delayed error correction, when you write it on the board and they see it and they can fix it, that's great. But in terms of, like, if the mistake is fossilized, unless you stamp on it every single time, you know, that mistake is gonna stay with them. So I really feel so strongly that, you know, even your beginners and your elementary level learners need that element of immediate correction to stop them from becoming unintelligible, you know, as they rise up through the levels, they get to B1, B2 level, you know, unless you give them sort of, like, you know, specific remedial practice. And I guess maybe here we have to think about the difference between, you know, is it mistakes with grammar or is it mistakes with pronunciation? You know, because you can give them all of the gap fills under the sun, so they can try and fix the grammar problem, you know, until it becomes routine and it becomes rote. But with pronunciation, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. And, you know, you're not going to follow them around all the time. So when they're making that mistake without you, you know, they either need to learn to self-correct, or they're just going to, you know, let it go unchecked. So that can be a challenge for sure. I'd love to hear from people who work with both kids and adults. I saw that Katia said that she wants her, the adult students that she works with, like to be corrected. I'm wondering if you guys have young learner experience as well, and whether your approach to correction differs when you're working with adults versus when you're working with children. Does anybody have experience of young learners and adults?
I have a little bit, Susie, if I can add. So with kids, they are different. They do not necessarily seem to care in a sense, like they are more playful, you know, they are not that fixated on the errors, and they are like a sponge, just, oh my God, can learn so fast. So I think in that case, error correction is important as well, of course. But then I just approached that in a more playful way. So facial expressions, you know, a lot of smiling, also the use of emojis, for instance. You know, you have those cards and then you just hold one of them up, depending on, you know, if they did something well, then you hold a smiley face up. You know, if there is something off, let's say, then you choose another one, you know. So like that can be an idea, actually, and being gentle, I think. So it's not a big deal. It's a learning process. So again, so
I love that idea. I've always like wanted to have sort of like, you know, if you guys ever watch Dancing with the Stars, or in the UK it's called Strictly Come Dancing, they have like score paddles. I keep thinking I should get like a wooden spoon with like an S, like, you know, stuck onto my wooden spoon. So anytime I'm having a conversation with somebody who says like, you know, she have this and like, you know, he have that, and I can hold up my little S paddle and get them to like, you know, self-correct that third person verb ending. But I think those kinds of like little prompts can be really, really useful. And I think the same thing, I mean, with adults, maybe not so much emojis, but yeah, the smiling, the thumbs up, you know, the nodding, you know, making sure that you look encouraging. So, you know, I've just seen, I'm still looking earlier in the chat box, like Nicola's comment about tackling tumbleweed moments with really shy students who are really, really scared to speak. You know, so really making sure that your expression is open and welcoming and smiley. You know, if possible, you know, you can get the super shy students to speak after they've been in a breakout room, because when they're in breakout rooms, they can rehearse their answers. You know, it's so important to give them the opportunity to have a go at the language before you bring them back to main session and, you know, put them on the spot in front of the class. But as I said, advanced validation works really well for that. So if they've been in breakout rooms and when you come out, you know, you can say, you know, Sun Lee, you told a really interesting story about your hedgehog. Tell everybody, you know, so you're kind of like acknowledging that you'd heard, validating their speech and encouraging them to, you know, to say it in front of everybody. So I think, you know, making correct choices, you know, so you're going to have your dominant verbose students, and that's great, but maybe you can start with like, you know, always making sure that you're choosing a shyer student after they've had rehearsal time in breakout rooms, and you're giving them that confidence, and you're telling them that they're already correct, that it's already interesting. And like, you know, maybe, you know, don't go so heavy on the immediate correction with your shyer students at the beginning. Wait until their confidence and the rapport is developed, and maybe just like stick to delayed error correction for those kinds of errors. But yeah, we need to make sure that all students are contributing, because again, how are they going to get better if they never speak?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a pen. I got it as a present from a colleague of mine, and on the top of that there is the head of someone, a very angry one. And so I came up with the idea that with my adult students, whenever they make a mistake, I just hold it up. So as opposed to me frowning or, you know, getting annoyed or whatever, this face does the thing for me. So whenever it's up in the air, they know that, ooh, I need to think and correct myself. That's also great. And also because then you do not speak, you know, the teacher doesn't speak, you do not interrupt them, they are still in their own thoughts. So it might be easier for them just to go back and reformulate what they meant to say.
Yeah, I think giving the students time to speak is really important as well. So I don't know what your scheduling is like, Nicola, if you have like some control over your own scheduling, but you know, when you're doing receptive skills lessons and you've got the talking task at the end, you know, really trying to make sure that you've got the time for the learners to do a little bit of speaking. And if possible, you know, maybe trying to fit in like one fully speaking lesson, maybe every like week or every 10 days. You know, again, one of the workshops I did was on teaching productive skills, where I give you the framework for teaching writing and teaching speaking, because asking students like just a general global question of like, you know, where did you go on your last holiday and did you enjoy it? You know, that might be great for like a 2 or 3 minute conversation. But if we want to really get our learners to be making longer utterances and to be like, you know, initiating and sustaining conversations for 8 to 10 to 12 minutes, then looking at a speaking lesson framework and thinking about how you can set up a lesson so that the students are fully supported to be able to have, you know, a good like 15-minute chunk of time when they're just chatting between sort of like 2 or 3 of them, that can be really, really beneficial for their confidence. Because sometimes in a receptive skills lesson, you know, maybe the teacher, the vocabulary took a bit longer than expected. Maybe if it's a listening lesson, they massively struggled and you had to play it an unexpected 3rd time. And then so by the time you get to the final fluency task, maybe they've only got like a couple of minutes and there's not really enough time to kind of get much conversation out of them. Whereas if you budget time for an actual speaking lesson, where they've got, you know, language fed in, you know, they've got a stimulus, they've got motivation to speak, and then they can actually really practice, you know, engaging in conversation, then there's going to be a lovely opportunity for delayed error correction at the end of that, where you can work on leveling up maybe vocabulary, or if a grammar problem has cropped up, you can make a note of that for like another lesson. But you don't have to do immediate error correction in a speaking lesson because they're in breakout rooms just getting on with it without you. So yeah, thank you, Hedy. Planning for productive skills might be another really useful workshop to check out. I see your hands, Nicola.
Yeah, I was going to say that's really, really useful, and I think I'm going to be quite fortunate in the fact that the lessons are, or my manager has said that if you don't get through everything in the lesson, don't worry. If the students are actually going off at a slight tangent, don't worry either, even though that's something in TEFL we were told, try and steer them back. But I've been told that no, the most important thing is to get them communicating, get them talking, get them in conversation.
Yeah.
So if it goes off topic, don't worry about it, because
Absolutely.
The whole thing is you want them to be talking.
Yeah, and as long as they're speaking, like what they're speaking about is kind of irrelevant, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but no, that is really, really helpful. And what was the other? Oh, sorry, Hedvig, you've just put it in, that the title, the masterclass, planning for productive skills. Right, I'll have a look at that as well. Thank you. This is so good. This is so good.
Gallery is built for people like you, Nicola. Yeah, that was the whole purpose behind it. It was built to support people who are coming off CELTAs or TEFL qualifications, because the information you get is intense and you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it's only after the course finishes and you're actually in your first teaching job that things actually start to process properly and you start to make sense of them. And as the need arises, then your motivation to figure out how to do something is stronger, because obviously on the course, you're so busy worrying about assignments or lesson plans or teaching that you haven't really got the brain space for anything else. So yeah, I mean, I would say subscribe, because there's just a wealth of amazing stuff on Gallery. I'm just like, one cog in a machine of, brilliant people. And there's loads of great videos on YouTube, but it's kind of unpoliced. Obviously you'll have your names like Adrian Underhill or like Jeremy Harmer, and that's great. But there's so much else on YouTube that the quality is difficult to kind of control. Whereas on Gallery, everything has been curated. It's delivered by CELTA trainers, or, by very experienced teachers, or by academic managers. And so everything that is on Gallery is coming from an expert. So the quality is controlled. So I'd say it's well worth the subscription money, because, if this is your first year in teaching, there'll be like dozens of websites, dozens of webinars that you can look at that will hopefully really support you on your first teaching rung of the career.
Yeah, no, that's lovely, and I am really enjoying the gallery teachers site. I think it's excellent.
Good.
So yes, probably in the new year when I've actually got some money coming in.
Yeah, exactly. I just saw that lovely Christmas present. That's it.
Yes.
Poking all your relatives, going, this is what I want for Christmas. This is what I need for Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm just having a little look back in the chat box, and Hedy mentioned that there are students who ask the teacher to correct every error they make. And what would you do, or what do you do in a situation like that? And Katia, you've just said that correcting every error is exhausting. So I'd love to hear from you, Katia. Like, you said that your adult students want to be corrected. Have you had that conversation where somebody wants you to correct every single mistake they make?
Yes, sometimes, in a classroom, you have 2 or 3 students that are just very good ones, and they love to be corrected. Or, there are just these students, like, they want to know, to explain every single detail of the lesson, like, and what I try to do is, I try, as I told you before, to keep a balance, because I also need to pay attention to everybody, not
Yeah.
just to them. So I try just to tell, okay, yes, but I try to explain something, but not in every detail. But I at the same time I try to talk and I try to explain the other students or pay attention to the needs of the other students
Yeah.
who are not like the best of the class. Because sometimes adults become like kind of obsessed with this, and that's not healthy at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's like kind of they want like call attention on their skills, right? And that's not the purpose of the lesson.
Yeah.
That's not
No,
the purpose.
that's so
It's
that's
not to
so
show up,
true.
right?
Yeah.
It's not to show up.
Absolutely.
That's not that. And I try to do it very kindly and but at the same time very clear.
Yeah. That's great.
No,
Yeah,
it's not to
absolutely.
show up. It's not a kind of, you need to pay attention to everybody, of course, but with sincerity and very polite. I try to keep to like to keep you need to establish limits with that.
Yes.
And also for error correction.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when I'm working with adults, I definitely think that we can be transparent, with them. We can say, listen, I love that you're contributing so much and what you've got to say is really interesting, but there are 10 other people that I'd also like to hear from, so just kind of like giving them a gentle reminder that it's not just about them, or if there is a student who's saying, oh, teacher, I want you to correct every single mistake I make. Again, I would say, well, you know what, if I did that, you'd never finish a sentence. So why don't you trust me and trust my training that I will choose to correct the errors that are the biggest problem for you. And once we fix the biggest problems, then we can start working on the smaller problems. But let's focus on maybe, one thing at a time. So I personally don't see any reason why you can't be transparent, with your adult learners sometimes. And I think as well, classroom management can be a great way of helping with that. Like sometimes if you've got breakout rooms, you might want to put like, some of your strongest students together so that they can all show off together. And then you can spend more of your time, with the breakout room who are maybe a little bit slower or a little bit more needing of teaching and attention. So you can do that in your breakout rooms as well, pop into the advanced breakout room, again, just acknowledge and validate the work that they're doing. And then you can go and spend time with like, the lower level learners who really need you, more than the higher level ones do.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
Yeah, Hedi's just made a really good point that everybody pays the same for the course. So it's up to us to kind of like distribute our attention evenly. And yeah, as teachers, of course, we always strive to do that, but there are sometimes going to be those students who are like, clamoring for attention. And so it's about, picking your moments when you kind of like, bring them on board. Definitely. And that could be something like, having them maybe like do a little bit of a mini teach, it's like, oh, Ahmed, I know that you know how the past simple is formed. Why don't you tell everybody? So like you can give them the opportunity to kind of like, take over a little bit. Or if they're in breakout rooms, saying, why don't you have control of the board and like, you write up all of the answers in feedback for me. So you can kind of like, bring them on board and give them a bit more to do. But yeah, it like you say, it's always walking that line, and I've got no doubt that you're super polite and lovely, because that's how I'm experiencing you. I think a bit more like firm and bossy, and I seem to kind of get away with it most of the time. But I think that I think my students understand that I've got their best interests at heart, and so what I'm doing and the decisions that I'm making are because I want what's best for them.
Yes, that's a good point, to offer them the opportunity also to teach, and they can express what they know.
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
Why not? It's absolutely right?
Yeah, I think this is the great
Yes.
thing for me about working with adults, that I mean, like the same thing goes with kids as well, but like adults are another resource in the room, right? They're another resource. They've got ideas and opinions, and they've got ways of expressing themselves. And you know, I mean, a level is you know, a level is not a point, is it? A level is a band, you know, so you're always going to have your students who are this end of the band and your students who are this end of the band. And of course, when they're comparing themselves, they see a mismatch, but there's still a band that they may be like not quite ready for the next level yet, but they do have more knowledge and understanding than people who've maybe just come up, you know, from a level. So why wouldn't you make the most of them as a resource, especially in breakout rooms? You know, like I love the fact that, you know, now that we're online, we can open ourselves up to like a lot more people. But as a teacher, which I am at heart, and a trainer, I really miss not hearing everything at the same time. You know, like when I'm in a physical classroom, even with 18 people, you know, I've got this like, you know, ability to kind of like listen in to different parts of the room and just get a sense of what's going on around me. You know, in breakout rooms, we can't do that. We have to make sure that we're moving really quickly. And so, you know, that's always going to be the downside. But if I know that I've got, you know, a strong student in 2 of my breakout rooms who can like answer questions and like, you know, pick up the slack for me, great. You know, why wouldn't I bring them on board? And again, you know, like acknowledgement and validation of those learners whenever you can, to kind of like, you know, build their confidence and reward them for having the patience to teach to the people who are a lower level, you know. So the lower level learners benefit because they're getting specific support, and then the higher level learners benefit because they're having their knowledge used, so they feel kind of important.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Cool. Great. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they want to throw in the box? I'm really curious to find out, maybe both from Gabby and from Hedy, when you were a student learning, what was your kind of attitude to error as a student, and has it influenced your attitude to error as a teacher?
Hedy, did you want to go first?
Yes. Thank you for being so generous. Actually, yes, because often what I experienced, even in my native language, I'm from Hungary, or when I was learning English, which actually hasn't really come to an end, I need to say, but so what I noticed is that very often I didn't get an explanation, you know, what was off, like things were underlined in red. I never used red since then to start with, and it was not gentle at all, so it just didn't really serve me, in a sense that I didn't know, like, you know, like I put on paper, I said things to the best of my knowledge, and then when I got, I don't know, just corrected, in a way I just didn't really have the idea how to, or had the idea how to make it better next time. And so I had all those question marks in my mind. And so how it informed my way of correcting errors is to be really gentle. First of all, the students, the learners, do not make mistakes to annoy me. They make mistakes because this is where they are. So I think this is so important to understand, because this can help us let go of a lot of annoyance and frustration. And then also I like eliciting, you know, like self-correction, peer correction, as opposed to just directly telling students what's wrong. And when it comes to, let's say, teaching adults, preparing them for exams, for instance, then it's also important that, because you have probably discussions, you know, after they hand in an essay or whatever, even though the topic is oral correction, but the same goes for speaking. You just have a discussion maybe about, you know, how to do things in a different way, but again, trying to elicit information step by step and focusing on one little thing at a time, and then just building up on that in coming sessions. So it's just I'm more sensitive, I can guess, and paying attention to the fact that, okay, so the correction happened, but will this make the student better, or can they benefit from that? So does it help them to make less mistakes, and in a way that they do not feel completely like embarrassed and just bad.
Yeah.
So it's like, because you can give you can have an error correction session in a way that students just fly home happily, empowering them in their knowledge.
And that's why I think it's super important as well to always focus on the content before you dive into before you dive into the language. Always think about what they've said before you look at the mistakes. So this, I mean, I'll be doing like the written error in the new year, but always writing something like, this was a really interesting thing to learn about, rather than just going, here are your 10 mistakes. You want to acknowledge and validate the work they've been doing for you. And I'm going to take that away, Hedy, that they're not making mistakes to annoy me. It's like, sometimes it feels like it on a CELTA course, that they're just getting their instructions wrong to annoy me. But yeah, you're right. They're not doing it on purpose.
And when this came to me, oh my God, like 75% of my stress just evaporated.
That's good to know. I can learn a lesson there for sure. Yeah, and I think as well, the fact that you pointed out, you try to kind of like, encourage a collaborative approach, so peer correction and self-correction, because I find that, if they're just given those 2 or 3 thinking seconds of time, they can often self-correct. Yeah, so it doesn't need to be the teacher, like, standing on the pedestal of the great I am, I know, and you don't know. They know stuff. They often know when they've got things wrong. So let's give them the opportunity to self-correct first. Do we have time for your response, Gabby?
Yeah, it's just that I wonder if I could actually turn it into another question for you, Susie.
Okay.
So what if my belief about correction as a teacher differ from my students' beliefs? Let's say Nicola is going to get this new class, Korean students. What if the way she understands correction, and she has her principled approach to correction, what if this differs from her students' understanding of correction? Katya said she has students who want to be corrected all the time. What if there are students who don't want to be corrected? So my question really is, what do you do if your students' beliefs are totally different? Then how are you going to make them happy?
Well, I think if they're adults, again, that's a conversation. If somebody has paid for my expertise, then I would like to think that they can trust my expertise to know how and when to correct them. But something I've done in the past before is use a traffic light system. I can do that in a physical classroom. I don't really know how I can do that in Zoom unless they've got like, little post-it notes handy. But regardless of the students' essential beliefs around correction, maybe they come into school one day feeling a little bit tired or a little bit hungover or a little bit stressed or a little bit sad, and they're kind of like, just lay off me today, teacher. So, red would be, just don't correct me. I'm not in the mood. Yeah, just let me speak, leave me be. Green would be, go for your life. You've got the green light to correct anything that comes out of my mouth with my, with my permission. And amber would mean, I trust you to correct me on the things that are the most important. So I might maybe introduce the traffic light system and say, look, I'm your teacher. It's my job to correct you, but maybe we can negotiate together on what that correction looks like.
Yeah, brilliant. How important do you think it is to actually communicate your correction policy to students? So we're talking about overt teaching again. Because again, I mean, I'm just referring to what Nicola said earlier and Katya. The fact that you understand what you correct, how you correct, and when you correct it is one thing. But if your students, if you don't let your students in on this, if they don't know your reasons and your policies, is this going to be effective, all your correction policy?
I think if they're kind of like, the university students, then they're used to being in an academic environment with an expert in front of them. So I would just be really clear that, you are going to get corrected because that's part of my job, but I'm going to make decisions about when to correct and how to correct. And I trust that you give me your faith that I can do that. I think, and Hedy mentioned that with with younger learners, they don't even know, they're just little kids, so they're just super absorbent, so you haven't even got to be overt in the correction. They probably don't even know they've made a mistake half of the time. But I think with your older learners, maybe people who do have some fossilized errors, maybe just drawing attention to that and saying, look, I'm here to help you. You've signed up to this English course because you want to get better, you want to improve, and one thing that we can do to improve you straight away is fix some of these errors.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can say something about it, what you said. Also, for me, it's very useful if I have an activity that for me is very important during my program. And I just, before that, I talk to the students to say, okay, in this activity, you are going to be corrected in this way and that way, but at the end, I'm going to play a little bit with both, with error correction, but also to give them like a positive. So this works for me very, very well.
Thank you, Katja.
Yeah.
I think this brings us to the end of our session, unless you have anything to add, Susie.
No, I think that's absolutely valid. That, yeah, pick your battles, and you know your students for sure. Thank you all so much for participating. That was so interesting. Yeah. Really enjoyed chatting to you guys.